Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I am doing well. I can hardly believe that we are already more than halfway through October. And
Wild.
yes, and this month has been amazing. We've heard from so many of our listeners that they are just really loving the stories that we've been sharing this month and loving and appreciating the information that we've been sharing about domestic violence for Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Absolutely. I've learned so much this month, especially just signs that I would not look out for that I would have never really noticed maybe. So as like we've talked a lot about us having kids that are getting ready to date or are dating, to be able to see these signs way before, maybe something escalates, it's invaluable. I mean, I'm just thrilled that we're doing this. And yeah, I hope it's helping other people as much.
Yes, me too. I feel like this has been such a wonderful opportunity to be able to even share, like you were saying, a little bit more information and more in-depth information as far as resources and signs to look out for, and just information that people might not, some things that you might think are common sense, but you have never heard them verbalized. And
right.
There are some things that are going to come up in this episode that I'm really happy that we're going to be able to share this week. More detailed information about the cycle of abuse and how it pertained to this week's story. So we're just going to get really directly into it. Meghan Kiefer was someone who left a lasting impression on everyone she met. Born on June 29th, 1994, Meghan was the first of 4 kids born to her mom, Bevan, who we actually had the honor of working with to produce this episode. Bevan and Meghan's father were married, but he was abusive and she ended the marriage in 1995. Bevan found love again and remarried in 2000, and Meghan's new stepfather happily stepped right up to the plate. According to Bevan, Meghan and her stepdad were thick as thieves. She said they were inseparable and they had an amazing father-daughter relationship, and Meghan called him dad. The family lived in Long Island, New York. Meghan always loved other kids, even when she was still just a kid herself, so she was absolutely delighted when her first little sister came along. Meghan was 8 at the time, and she treated her new baby sister like a real-life baby doll. And as someone who had a sister born, I was a little younger, I was actually 5, but
Right.
that was so, I actually vividly remember just feeling like how cool and fun it was to have a little baby sister and just to be this little girl myself, who looks up to my mom and other women who have babies. And for a lot of little girls, that's what we are thinking that our lives are going to turn into one day, and that we want to emulate that. And so I feel like at 8 years old to get a new baby sister, like, absolutely would be just so exciting.
My brother is 8.5 years younger than me. And so it was me and my sister. And there's so many pictures of us literally dressing him up in doll clothes because like, that's what you did. Like, this is your little doll. So it is such a that's such a fun age actually to have an age difference because you are like this little mom.
For sure. Yeah. So being a big sister was something that really did fill Meghan with a lot of pride. Eventually, the family grew to include 2 sisters and a brother, and Meghan was close with all of them. She had a unique way of bringing light into the lives of those around her, and her family meant everything to her. Meghan had a contagious laugh that came with her signature nostril flare, and this is something that her family would always crack up when they would see, and they would playfully tease her about it all the time. But it's one of many little things about Meghan that her family will always remember. Another example of the lighthearted back and forth that Meghan had with her family revolves around a time when Meghan was in about 6th or 7th grade, and her family was on their way home from a camping trip. One of the roads they passed is called Major Deegan Expressway, and there was a sign that had it abbreviated M.A.J. Deegan. And so as they drove past the sign, young Meghan was looking at it and saying, MJ Dijon. She wanted to know where MJ Dijon went. And so her parents were really confused. They're like, what are you talking about? Which, if you have kids, then you totally get these moments where your kid is saying something and you're like, what are you saying? And then when you realize
thinking,
what they're talking about, you're like, okay.
I see how that happened. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, of course, everybody in the car was just laughing and became hysterical. And it became a running joke that this name of this road was, MJ Dijon. And on the topic of Dijon, Meghan actually loved food as well. Anything from tacos to sushi to steak was just fine in her book. If there was food involved, whether she was cooking it or just enjoying it, Meghan was interested. And she really did love to cook, and that was a quality that her friends and family adored. In 2020, while having her arm in a cast and a pin in her hand, she even prepared her first and what would be her only full Thanksgiving meal for her friends. But her adventurous spirit went far beyond the kitchen. She loved to get out into the world and go camping with her family, usually in Montauk, and that's where she once claimed to have seen a UFO. Melissa?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a UFO?
I have not, but I went from not believing that they could be there to like maybe sort of kind of believing. So I've come a long way.
Okay, I will say we won't go too far into that, but I have questions about UFOs. Nobody believed Meghan. I think I might believe her. She was adamant. Yeah, she was adamant about what she had seen. And something else that is a little quirky is that even though Meghan was scared of needles as a child, she ended up growing up and finding a love for tattoos. And so her family thought that, this was a really funny contradiction.
Yeah.
Somebody who can't even stand getting their blood drawn, wants to get a lot of tattoos. But they felt that in a way, this was actually a contradiction that kind of rang true in many aspects of Meghan's life. She was always this mix of strength and vulnerability. She loved fiercely and gave generously, even when she was battling her own internal struggles. Sadly, underneath Meghan's joyful exterior, there was a woman shaped by deep challenges. Her teenage years were marked by trauma and a struggle with mental health, and her mom, Bevan, said that Meghan was someone who really just took on the personal responsibility of fixing others. Even throughout her own personal struggles, though, Meghan always kept her caring and nurturing way. She even worked as a home health aide at times, which was a profession that spoke to her as someone who had a real passion and desire for helping others and for healing. Meghan loved animals, big or small, but she had a real soft spot for pit bulls. She was absolutely obsessed with her pit bull named Supreme that was given to her as a birthday gift just months before tragedy unfolded.
After Meghan finished high school, life took her on a winding journey between different cities in New York and the southern U.S. Some of the places she lived included Long Island, Albany, Georgia, and a brief time she spent in Florida. But it was Albany, New York that she eventually settled and called home. Sometime in or around 2019, Meghan met a man who would soon come to dominate her life and who would drag her into a cycle of abuse and manipulation that would ultimately end in an unthinkable tragedy. Right from the start, the relationship between Meghan and this man was concerning. And you'll hear throughout the show, we will call him the man, him, her boyfriend, because Bevan, Meghan's mom, actually asked that we avoid using his name because she doesn't want him to get any attention from the story.
I love that so much.
Me too.
Yes,
me too.
I was so happy to do that. I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So Bevan isn't sure exactly how Meghan met him, but the relationship was strained and was always on again, off again. And Meghan had even confided in her mom that there was physical, emotional, and verbal abuse happening, and that these things had been escalating throughout the relationship. Bevan urged her daughter to break free from him and to seek help for her PTSD, which had only gotten worse. But Meghan's boyfriend was always there to pull her back in. After each incident of abuse or a blow-up, he would revert back to the honeymoon phase, where he would shower her with affection and be super apologetic so that Meghan wouldn't leave. Bevan soon learned that her daughter's boyfriend had a very troubling past, including convictions for serious offenses, including strangulation and second-degree assault, both of which he served time in prison for. He also had an attempted assault charge from 2010. Even though he had this violent history, his parole officer was never notified that Meghan had filed a domestic violence charge against him, and he remained a free man. And thus, the cycle of abuse continued. This blew my mind. Parole officers can get you on, anything, not checking in,
yeah,
not calling when you're supposed to, all that, but literally
if they show up at your house and your lights are not off at the right time, you can get in trouble for that. It is mind-blowing to think that they overlooked something this huge.
Right, absolutely. He manipulated Meghan in every possible way he could. For example, if she didn't rub his feet when he came home from work, he would accuse her of not loving him. Eventually, though, he stopped working altogether and became financially dependent on Meghan and would even steal money from her. But no matter what she did to try to protect herself, like changing her Cash App login or hiding her debit cards, he always found a way to regain control. Bevan was so unsettled by this man and his past and current behaviors that she wouldn't even allow him to come to her home, especially because she had Meghan's younger siblings to look out for, and she didn't want a violent offender in the house. Things took an even darker turn when Meghan's boyfriend imprisoned her in her own home. So this is coming from a police report at that time, but after Meghan tried to break up with him, he wanted her to call him, but she refused. He then broke into her apartment, which was on the second floor. He got in through the rooftop and started striking Meghan in the face and head while saying, "I told you to call me." When Meghan started screaming, he said, "If you don't stop screaming, I'm going to kill you." Meghan eventually threatened to call the police, which caused him to leave. She managed to call them, and when they got there, she had visible injuries and was in significant pain. No charges were filed. However, Meghan did file a petition under the Family Court Act, which is designed to protect victims of domestic violence. The boyfriend was issued a court appearance ticket, and once again, Meghan was not protected from her abuser, and she was left in a vulnerable position. As Mandy mentioned before, she loved animals, and so one of the ways this guy would try to control Meghan was through her love of animals. After one fight, he brought home a pit bull puppy named Supreme and told Meghan it was her birthday present. And so having this puppy gives Meghan a reason to stay, even though every other part of her relationship was coming unraveled.
So Bevan described the relationship between Meghan and her boyfriend as being cyclical. He would abuse Meghan, she would try to leave him, then he would love bomb her and just go over the top with these displays of affection to get her to stay, and then the abuse would resume again. This is actually a very common tactic used by abusers and really should be understood and recognized as a major red flag. And so, therefore, we're actually going to go into pretty significant detail about the cycle of abuse and recognizing the signs of it. According to Safe Family Justice Centers, the cycle of abuse is a repeating pattern that keeps the victims trapped in harmful relationships. It often involves periods of tension building, explosive incidents, reconciliation, and then a period of calm. Being able to recognize this pattern and these stages can empower victims and their support networks to take action. During the first stage, which is the tension building stage, the pressure is slowly mounting, and minor incidents and conflicts start to escalate, and the abuser might show signs of anger, hostility, or just irritability, and this leaves the victim feeling like they're walking on eggshells and just trying to prevent their partner from having an outburst. This phase can last anywhere from a couple of hours to several weeks, and it's marked by increased arguments, blame and criticism, and anxiety and fear actually emerging within the victim. You know, they're feeling like every day, what's going to happen?
Right.
The next stage is the most dangerous, as it's when the abuser fully unleashes their anger. This is the incident outburst and violence stage, and it can involve physical violence, emotional abuse, or other forms of harm. This might be short-lived, but it leaves deep emotional scars on the victim. Signs and symptoms of this stage include physical injuries, verbal threats and insults, and destruction of property. After the outburst, the abuser then moves into the next stage, which is the reconciliation or the honeymoon phase. And this is where the abuser becomes very remorseful. They start apologizing. They start listing excuses for their behavior, or sometimes even denying that the abuse has even occurred, or says that, the victim is making it out to be a lot worse than it really was. During this stage, they often promise that they're going to change and shower the victim with affection, gifts, or other gestures. The final stage is the calm before the storm phase. And during this phase, the relationship between the couple appears completely normal. There's no visible violence or tension happening, and this can lead the victim to believe that their abuser really has turned over a new leaf and that things really are going to be different. A false sense of security can be formed during this time, but this period is usually temporary, and the cycle eventually starts back over with the tension building stage. The cycle of abuse takes a severe toll on the victim, both emotionally and psychologically, and it can lead to depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health issues, which is crucial to understand when interacting with someone who is in an abusive situation, because the victim may have low self-esteem, they may feel isolated, and they may even withdraw. While breaking free from the cycle of abuse is challenging, it's very possible with careful planning and support. The first steps include making the decision to leave and seeking assistance to create a detailed safety plan, often with the help of professionals who are experienced in supporting victims of abuse. And we're going to have a lot more information about all of this in the show notes for you guys to check out.
By June of 2021, Meghan had fallen into a deeper depression and was starting to have suicidal thoughts at times. But Bevan thought that Meghan was finally starting to recognize what she had to do in order to reclaim her life. In late June of that year, Meghan bravely checked herself into a hospital for help. But her boyfriend called the hospital relentlessly and heavily pressured Meghan to check herself out and come back to him, which she eventually did. At some point, though, Meghan did decide to end the relationship and she asked him to leave the apartment they shared. But due to squatters' rights in New York, she wasn't actually able to really force him out. She didn't have many other options, but she knew she had to get away from this man. So she left everything behind and she moved back to Long Island. And we mean everything. She left her apartment, many of her belongings, the car that she co-owned with him, but she's the only one that's paying for it, and even her beloved puppy, Supreme. In Long Island, Meghan stayed with her grandmother and helped care for her while she was trying to rebuild her life. She got a job at a bar where she quickly became a valuable member of the team. Her coworkers described her as being loving and caring. But unfortunately, Meghan's abuser wasn't willing to let her go that easily. At some point in 2021, Meghan's grandmother, who she had been staying with and caring for, fell and she got hurt and had to go stay in a rehab facility. During that time, Meghan's ex-boyfriend shows up in Long Island with the pit bull Supreme in tow. Definitely, using this as a pawn to work his way back in Meghan's good graces since she loved the dog so much. So they didn't exactly get back together, but he did start staying at Meghan's grandmother's house temporarily. He would stay there sometimes, and sometimes he would stay other places. He would also show up at the bar where Meghan worked and sometimes would behave in ways that concerned her coworkers. But Bevan believes that at this time, Meghan thought she was safe from physical violence at the hands of her ex because they weren't really together anymore. And sadly, this was far from being true. And we still have more to get into after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors. So Mandy, I know we're both gearing up for the holidays, trying to get the house ready for guests and all that.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. Have you actually started yet?
I actually have. I just picked up these amazing Marcus Outdoor metal chaise lounges from Wayfair. I got them in the color navy and they've completely transformed my patio. They're so comfortable and really the perfect spot to sit outside with a blanket and a hot drink as the weather cools down.
Ooh, that sounds really cozy, especially with the cooler days we've been having. I love Wayfair, but what made you go for those?
Honestly, they're super sleek and durable, and the navy color is just chef's kiss for fall. Plus, they're comfy enough to know that I'll use them year-round, whether I'm out there enjoying fall breezes or even relaxing in the spring or hot as heck in the summer.
That sounds perfect. And I'm guessing Wayfair made it super easy.
You know it. Fast, free shipping, and they showed up right when I needed them. Wayfair really does have everything, especially now with the holidays coming. From extra seating to holiday decor, I feel like it's the one place you can get it all.
Totally agree. It's like if you need to get your home ready to host or even just treat yourself, Wayfair's the place.
Exactly. And there's no better time than now. So if you're listening and you're thinking about updating your space, or if you're like me and you just need an excuse to get something new for the season, Wayfair's got you covered. Wayfair is your one-stop holiday shop for everything on your to-do list this season. Head to wayfair.com right now to get your home holiday ready. That's WAYFAIR.com, Wayfair. Every style, every home. So Mandy, I have to tell you, I've been using Nurture Life for my son, and it's really a game changer. He's so picky about everything he eats, and so I honestly wish I had actually known about this when my kids were younger.
Oh, I bet. I wish I had something like Nurture Life back when mine were younger, too. It sounds absolutely amazing.
It really is. It's a meal delivery service made specifically for kids, and it's really perfect for busy parents like us. The meals are fresh, healthy, and they come fully cooked, and they're ready in just a minute. My son has been loving the chicken parm with the super veggie spaghetti, and I have to admit, I've been sneaking a few bites myself.
That really sounds good. I remember the dinner time battles we used to have. If Nurture Life had been around back then, it really would have made my life so much easier.
Exactly. And now with school in full swing and the holidays right around the corner, I love that I don't have to worry about what to make him for dinner or if what I'm feeding him is healthy or not. Nurture Life's meals are actually designed by dietitians, so I know that I'm giving my son something good he likes, and something good he'll actually eat. If you're a parent with younger kids, this is seriously the way to go. Nutri-Life also has on-the-go snacks and superfood smoothies, so kids can eat well no matter what they're in the mood to eat.
This is one I will be telling all my friends with little ones about for sure.
And they'll thank you for it. You really can't go wrong with Nurture Life.
It's about time that a flexible meal subscription existed for babies and kids. So head to nurturelife.com and use code MOMS for 55% off your first order. That's right, 55% off. Once again, that's nurturelife.com for 55% off. And make sure you use our promo code MOMS so they know we sent you.
And now back to the episode.
Before the break, we were getting into some of the details of the abusive relationship that Meghan Kiefer was in with her boyfriend. At this point in the story, the couple has actually broken up, but Meghan has been staying with her grandmother, and her boyfriend has shown back up and is just generally being a bother to her. On the morning of October 23rd, 2021, Meghan told her ex that he had to leave because her grandmother was coming back home in 4 days and Meghan needed time to clean up and prepare the home for her arrival. Meghan texted her mom, Bevan, and explained the situation. She said that she was trying to get him to leave, but he was being difficult, and Meghan really didn't want to have to involve the police. But Bevan told Meghan that if he continued to refuse to leave, she had no choice but to call the police. But 5 hours later, he was still there. Meghan told her mom that he was leaving, but he was not happy about it because he didn't have anywhere to go, he had no money, and he even said, these dramatic things such as that he was just going to rob a store if he had to. But no matter what, he was not going back to prison. He even said that he would prefer a suicide by cop than to go back to jail. So obviously that's very concerning when someone is saying things like that are extreme, because it's like if this person means what they say, then they will literally do anything at that point. Meghan told her mom that she told her ex-boyfriend that was really his problem and, it was not her issue to have to deal with.
Good for her.
Yeah. During their conversation about it, Bevan reiterated that Meghan really needed to just focus on herself and her healing and growing, and they exchanged their I love yous before hanging up the phone. Bevan had no idea that it would be her last conversation with her daughter. Later that day, Meghan went to visit a friend and her friend's 1-year-old twins, and they made plans to go shopping. While they were on the way to shop, Meghan realized that her ex still had her credit card, so they returned to Meghan's house to go back and get it. Meghan's friend waited in the car with her babies while Meghan went inside the house. But when Meghan came back outside, her ex was trailing behind, and a fight between the two of them broke out on the front porch. Meghan tried to get back into her friend's car, but her ex-boyfriend dragged her back and began a terrifying attack. Meghan's friend got out of the car to break up what looked to be a fist fight happening, and that's when she actually saw a knife. Then the man lunged at Meghan's friend and started going after her, so she ran to the street before he finally stopped pursuing her and got back into his car. He backed out of the driveway, almost running Meghan over, and he even hit Meghan's friend's car in the process, which has her 1-year-old twins inside. This whole thing is so heartbreaking and horrifying to think about. But he took off. He hightailed it down the street and left Meghan laying on the front lawn. Meghan's friend dialed 911 and frantically reported the attack. She gave a description of Meghan's ex along with his license plate number, and officers were immediately able to begin searching for him. The first responders did as much as they could on the scene, but she was rushed to the hospital where doctors fought to save her life.
Meanwhile, Bevan got a call from the hospital informing her that Meghan had been in an accident, which was initially confusing because Bevan didn't know what kind of accident it was. And she worried that Meghan, who didn't have a driver's license, may have tried to drive her grandmother's car. But when the hospital told her that Meghan had actually been stabbed, Bevan was in disbelief. As Bevan rushed to the hospital, she got another call from her friend who lived across the street from Meghan's grandmother's house. This friend said the police were there and asked for a photo of Meghan's ex-boyfriend. The neighbor wanted to know if Bevan was able to provide one. Bevan was on her speakerphone and she was able to talk to the police officer there herself while she drove and was looking for this photo. During the call, the officer stated that Meghan had been stabbed in the hand, which Bevan took to mean that she wasn't badly hurt and would just need to have surgery, but would be okay. Same thing. I would be thinking that too.
Right.
Like, if you're only specifically saying the hand, I would think they would say everywhere if they meant everywhere.
And this could just be a case of there's a lot going on at the scene at the time, and a lot of people don't maybe have all the information, but this is kind of just one of those situations where I feel like, unfortunately, there was information passed along that may not have been accurate or didn't accurately convey what was happening.
Exactly. When she got to the hospital, though, Bevan was left alone in a waiting room for hours. At the time, her husband was out of state, so she had no one there with her to face this uncertainty and fear. Nobody had told Bevan that while Meghan was being transported to the hospital, she actually went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead within minutes of arriving at the hospital. Hours passed before Bevan finally spoke with a nurse and asked for an update on Meghan's condition. The nurse said that she would go find someone to come talk to Bevan, but they were probably still working on Meghan. So again, this gives Bevan false hope that her daughter's going to be okay and that they were working on her and, of course, thinking everything would eventually be figured out. And this hope was tragically untrue. Eventually, the police came into the room where Bevan was waiting and delivered the unimaginable news. Meghan had been stabbed 10 times, and the doctors were not able to save her. Bevan was, of course, immediately overcome with shock, but she asked if they would be able to donate Meghan's organs. Sadly, because she had been murdered, that wouldn't be possible. How selfless is that in the middle of this?
Oh my gosh, it gives me chills.
I know, to be thinking of other people in that kind of a moment is just, I have so much respect for her. When Bevan asked if she could see her daughter one last time, the police gently advised against it and told her she wouldn't want to see Meghan in the condition she was in. Bevan was then faced with the heartbreaking task of calling her husband and telling their 3 other children that Meghan was gone. In Bevan's own words, a lot of hearts were broken that night. It wasn't until later that Bevan found out about the true extent of the brutality. Meghan had not been stabbed 10 times. It was actually 54. She had wounds covering her head, neck, torso, and limbs, and had wounds that damaged her brain, lungs, jugular vein, and spleen. Defensive wounds found on her hands showed that she had fought for her life in a desperate struggle.
The next day, Crime Stoppers got a tip that Meghan's killer was trying to flee New York City by a Port Authority bus going to North Carolina. They were able to track down the bus he was on and found him. He actually gave them a fake name, but they did identify him for who he was, and that was the person who had stabbed Meghan Kiefer. He had a bandage on his right hand and a bag of medical supplies with him. He was arrested and taken in to be questioned, but the police did not tell him at the time that Meghan was already dead. Instead, they just asked him what happened. But all he would talk about was the dog Supreme. He didn't ask about Meghan at all, which was very upsetting for Meghan's loved ones. The police found his car the next day at Schmidt's family farm on Long Island. It had been abandoned there and was found with the interior covered in blood, and there was a folding knife found in the driver's side door. There was also a dash cam in the car, which police were able to look through, and they found footage showing that right after he stabbed Meghan and fled the scene, he spent the next half hour calling a series of people, and at one point told a friend, "It's over with." He said, quote, "I stabbed her mad times, bro." This is on recorded right after this has happened.
Right.
He's calling people and telling them what he's done. It's sickening is literally the only word for this.
Yeah, but also what an idiot. That's your
Yeah.
own dash cam, so
Right.
kudos to you.
In other recordings from this dash cam, he can be heard saying that he, quote, has to go somewhere and that there was blood all over. In another call, he told his friend that what happened wasn't domestic violence and said that he hadn't put his hands on a woman in years, which is,
Wow.
okay.
Kudos again.
Right. He also talked about how he had messed up his own hand in the process of stabbing Meghan. Then, possibly the most shocking one of all, he called his mom and told her what he had done. And she had absolutely no sympathy. She just said, "What did you do?" And I don't know if she ever even talked to him after that, but she never did visit him in jail or go to any of his court appearances in the future. At one point in these dashcam videos, he did stop and change clothes. It was later learned that the knife in the car had both Meghan and his blood on it, and the clothing in the car tested positive for Meghan's blood. Lastly, they found out that after he had abandoned the car, he was picked up in a Mercedes and driven to the bus station. Authorities charged him with second-degree murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. But he was facing 25 years to life, and in New York, that means that you have to serve at least 25 years before you're even eligible for any type of release. After the arraignment, Bevan and her husband went to the morgue to formally identify Meghan. They weren't allowed to see her body, but a photo was brought out for them to identify. At this point, they knew that she had been stabbed in the head, so Bevan's husband said that he would take a look at the photo so she didn't have to. When Bevan looked over his shoulder, she saw the black and white photo, though. Meghan's body was covered to her chin, and she looked like she was sleeping. The next time they saw her was at the funeral home. Bevan told us in her interview, quote, "I think the hardest thing I ever had to do was walk out of there and leave her behind. That was so hard."
Oh.
Absolutely gut-wrenching.
On April 26, 2023, jury selection began for the murder trial of the man who brutally took Meghan's life. By May 1st, opening statements were underway and 3 witnesses took the stand. One was the 911 dispatcher who took the call from Meghan's friend, as well as the officer who responded to the scene and tried to save Meghan. The officer testified that at exactly 4:50 p.m. on the day she was stabbed, Meghan's heart stopped beating for the first time. And this detail was actually very meaningful for Bevan, who didn't know about this fact until the trial. And that's because on the day of Meghan's murder, Bevan had been taking a nap on the couch and she had her alarm set to 5 p.m. But at exactly 4:50 p.m., she jolted awake and jumped off the couch, though she never understood why or knew why until she hears the officer's testimony.
Wow. That's honestly is so amazing to hear that was kind of validated for her, that she was able to get that piece of information. And I had put a note on the side that I had a similar thing. Actually, I had a similar experience in my life after my dad passed away. He passed away in his sleep overnight, and there's a lot of things, that I went through, and for some reason, I really wanted to know, when did he pass away?
Right.
We were not able to get an actual time of death because he kept his room very cold. The conditions of the room weren't right for them to actually tell us. But I had a similar thing where I was waking up in the night, specifically at 4:16 a.m. It happened for several months, multiple times a week after my father passed away. And at one point I was like, I just came to accept that was the time. Whether it was or wasn't, that's what, to me, that's what I took it to mean. And it was very comforting in a way to kind of have that, and just to be like, to have that feeling that person is with you still,
still connected.
Yeah, exactly. So that piece of the story definitely touched me for sure.
Yeah. The third person who testified was the surgeon who tried to save Meghan's life. He said that when they opened up Meghan's chest, she had lost so much blood that there was no blood in her chest cavity, which I don't feel like we've ever heard of before in one of the stories we've shared. After hearing testimony from these witnesses, the judge called for a lunch recess, but just as they were about to begin lunch, Meghan's ex said that he wanted to take a plea deal, and he agreed to plead guilty, but he wanted less than 25 to life for a sentence. Prosecutors said they'd have to check with the higher-ups, which they did, but they said no deal. The trial would proceed, which, thank goodness.
Good, yeah.
Next up was a witness who would have introduced the dash cam footage showing the ex admitting to murdering Meghan. But before that evidence could actually be introduced, he decided to plead guilty and take the 25 to life sentence. He also waived his right to appeal, which will come up a little later. The defense later said they didn't expect him to do this. They said they were encouraging him to plead guilty due to all the evidence, but ultimately it was his decision. He was then required to answer questions from the prosecution, which he did in the most arrogant way possible. For example, he was hesitant to admit that Meghan had ended their relationship and that he didn't like that. When they asked if he didn't like that Meghan wanted him out of his grandmother's house, he said, quote, "Depends how you look at it." And so then they asked him point blank, "Did you like hearing that?" And he said, yeah and no.
Oh my gosh, this person is so infuriating.
I can't even imagine. And literally the most serious thing he's gone through too. I mean, he's to be answering this so callously is just beyond.
This is your life also that's on the line. You would think you would have just the smallest amount of just remorse or compassion or anything.
Even to save your own butt, you'd think you
Right.
would pretend, but this guy can't. When he was asked about abandoning his car at the Schmidt family farm, he said, quote, unattended, not abandoned. Just because you parked your car overnight doesn't mean you abandoned the car, end quote. When he was confronted about getting on a bus to go to another state to avoid arrest, he claimed that wasn't the reason he was going to North Carolina. He said, quote, that's not the reason. Planning a vacation, I have a right to. Prosecutors then said, so it was a vacation for you? And he said, yeah. And before we all blow up in a fit of rage, let's take one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Melly, you know how much I love a clean home, but what I don't love are all those toxic chemicals. That's why I've made the switch to Branch Basics, and honestly, I am obsessed.
Okay, so I've heard good things about them, but what do you love the most?
Well, first of all, it's the peace of mind. As a mom, I want my home to be safe for my family, and with Branch Basics, I know I'm using something that's completely non-toxic and all natural. I don't have to worry about chemicals around my kids or even our pets. And get this, you can even wash your fruits and veggies with it. That's how safe it is.
That is amazing. And so it actually works?
Oh, it absolutely works. I was so surprised by how effective it is. The concentrate formula is genius. You can use it for everything. Plus, different bottles, like the ones for all-purpose or bathrooms, show on the side of the bottle how much concentrate you need, as well as where to fill the water line too. So there's no guesswork. I've cleaned countertops, done laundry, and even tackled some really tough stains. It's quickly replacing all the old cleaners I used to have cluttering up my cabinets. And there's no more harsh bleach smell. It's all about fresh, clean air in the house now.
I love it. Safe, effective, and eco-friendly. That's a win.
Totally. And once you run out, the only thing you need to reorder is the concentrate. It's such a great system. You no longer have to wear a hazmat suit while you're cleaning up. For a limited time only, head to branchbasics.com/moms and use code MOMS for 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off your order at branchbasics.com/moms with promo code MOMS. Choose Branch Basics because cleanliness matters.
It's been a while since I've had a baby of my own, and some days I miss it so much. The baby cuddles and baby smiles, but when it comes to diaper rashes, not so much. I remember the first time my oldest had a diaper rash, I was really devastated. Here's this tiny thing totally dependent on me, and now she's fussy and obviously uncomfortable, and I'm supposed to have the answers. Well, with time and treatment, it went away, but what I really wanted was to avoid it altogether. And now, baby butts rejoice. New Huggies Skin Essentials are here, a brand new dermatologist-approved line of diapers, wipes, and pull-ups training pants, all designed with baby's sensitive skin in mind.
The wipes are thick and have zero harsh ingredients for a great, gentle clean. Pull-Up Skin Essentials has got your big kid covered too, with a training pant that's ultra soft and breathable to help protect sensitive skin throughout potty training. Whether you're a first-time parent or a seasoned pro, make it easy on yourself and your baby with Huggies. Learn more at Huggies.com. Once again, head to Huggies.com to learn more.
And now back to the episode.
Before the break, we were talking about what was going on in the murder trial for the man who killed Meghan Kiefer. He got on the stand and pretty much insulted everyone in the courtroom, most of all Meghan's family, by just really, I don't even know how you would describe his behavior and the way he answered the questions.
I don't think the way we do our show, we can say the words that would describe it, right?
Yes, we can't. He did, however, decide to plead guilty just before they were about to introduce evidence showing him verbally admitting to committing this murder. After pleading guilty, a sentencing hearing was set for May 31st. In the meantime, he began the appeals process, even though he had actually waived his right to an appeal.
That's wild to me.
Right.
So brazen.
I guess he just thought rules aren't rules, like that I can
That's what it sounds like.
I can say I'm waiving my right to appeal, but then I can do it anyway. I guess he thought that was going to fly. But when May 31st rolled around, he actually didn't want to attend his sentencing hearing, and he wanted to waive his appearance. And that's up to the judge's discretion, whether they're going to allow or not. But in this case, prosecutors actually went to the judge and said that he needed to be brought over because there's a courtroom full of people who were there with the only purpose of seeing justice being carried out. So the judge, thankfully, denied his request and made him appear in court for his sentencing. Meghan's family read impact statements, and we would like to share what her mom Bevan had to say in hers since she so kindly shared these words with us. She said, quote, "How does a mother sum up her child's life? It is impossible to put it completely on paper or into words. Meghan made me a mom, a mommy, a mother, a madre, and most of all, she made me proud. Proud that she loved without end and always wanted to help others even when she couldn't help herself. I know she had her flaws, we all do, but she loved hard and that's what matters in the end. Not the mistakes made along the way, but the love for others. Meghan loves so many things and so many people. Sunrises, sunsets, all animals, food, especially tacos, sushi, and steak. She loved people. She loved babies. She loved her family. Myself, my husband who raised her and who she called dad, her sisters, her brother. She loved them so very, very much. She was always proud of their accomplishments, and she has missed such milestones and won't be here for any more. And the special people in her world, Kayla, Ashley, Staples, Sarah, Megan, Marissa, Grandma Buddy, Mina, and her grandfather Pop Pop. I take comfort knowing she's with her grandma and her grandfather Felix. She loved her aunts, but especially her Aunt Christine and her Aunt Karen, all of her uncles and all of her cousins. She loved camping in Montauk and the families we camped with, especially her Tommy Kirby. She loved Law & Order SVU and Ghost Whisperer. She would call or text me whenever there was a marathon on. She loved laughing, and her nostrils would flare in and out when she did. She hated clowns, scary movies, and needles, which is ironic considering how many tattoos she had. At her funeral, there were so many people, so many, and we didn't know more than half. They were people that Meghan had touched and impacted. They shared stories with us about how she would help them when they were in dark places, even if she was in one too. Meghan has missed so much and will miss even more. She's missed milestones for her sisters and brother, milestones for her friends, milestones for herself, things that will never happen now. But we know Meghan's with us always. We feel her. Meghan oftentimes seemed like an enigma, but she wasn't. She just wanted to love and be loved. The essence of her spirit, her personality, her being truly can't be described by words. To know her was to love her, even when she drove you crazy. There are no words that can bring Meghan back to all who love her. There's no sentence long enough to undo the hurt and the pain we all feel. All we can do now is to try and pick up the pieces and to live a life that would make Meghan proud.
Meghan's ex was given the chance to speak, and he actually had a whole 3-page long statement to read.
Made me roll my eyes.
I know. Like, you don't want to be there for this, but you now have prepared 3 pages. Okay. And on that note, Bevan said it's pretty messed up that the defendants get the last say in court. They get their chance to speak after the victim's family, which means they're getting the last word. And I never thought of that.
Never thought of that before.
Never put that together, but I can imagine. So, like, yeah, instead of leaving on this note of like talking about this loved one and everything, it's this killer who gets to have the last word.
And especially when it's this guy and you don't even know what's going to come out of his mouth. Yeah, he's so disrespectful and has absolutely no remorse and is just an evil person. Like that. To think of him speaking last is like, ugh.
Yeah, exactly. In this 3-page statement, the ex said that he was going to leave the courtroom with his head held high and his middle finger even higher as he waited for a decision on his appeal. He said he pleaded guilty not because he felt guilty, but because of rulings that suppressed evidence and the fact that he was not given a fair and impartial trial. He further said he prays for the victim's family, but he doesn't owe anyone an apology or explanation. This next line, I'm going to say exactly how Mandy wrote it because I just love it. In fact, Audacity was apparently on sale this day because he also said that Meghan's family should apologize to him because of the way they treated her while she was alive, claiming that her family was fake and phony and that they only cared about her now because she was gone, but they didn't care about her when she was here. Making it even more important for the family to have the last word, I think.
Yes.
Following up this. And Bevan said that he also mentioned something about hunting a rabbit and doing what needed to be done, and that he tried to equate himself to a murder, and to paraphrase Malcolm X. Remember last week?
What a guy.
Brian Laundrie, he basically said the same thing. Like, I had to help her. I had to put her out of her misery. I can't take this man. The judge told him that his statement was the most disgusting thing he'd ever heard, to which he replied, well, you don't have to like it. The judge told him he wasn't giving him any more time to speak and actually told him to shut up before he laid down the law and sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. As he was escorted out, Bevan said, enjoy your vacation. He got angry and said, I will. I'll be back. After sentencing, Bevan told the media she was focused on making sure her daughter's killer stayed behind bars for at least the 25-year minimum. She talked about bills that were pending that could allow him to be eligible for parole much earlier, and that she was working to support opposing bills that would strengthen the laws to keep killers behind bars. Bevan said, quote, "I've advocated for my daughter most of her life in various ways, and this is my final advocacy. He intended to kill her. This wasn't an act of passion," end quote. And even though the ex did waive his right to appeal, his attorney stated that he believes he does have a right to appeal the pretrial hearings, which they think adversely affected his case. For example, his defense had motioned for a change of venue due to the fact that Bevan worked for a law enforcement agency, but the appeals court did not agree that he deserved an appeal, and they found that he waived his rights to the appeal when he pleaded guilty and took the deal he took, so he will have to serve the 25 to life sentence.
Good.
Yes.
After Meghan's death, Bevan began advocating for those who are also affected by domestic violence. It began with asking for donations to local domestic violence agencies instead of sending flowers. One local agency, ECLI Vibes, invited Bevan in to see how the donations were allocated. They continued to invite her in over the following months, and Bevan went in to volunteer in January of 2022. Bevan felt a calling to continue volunteering for events they were hosting, and eventually she was invited to be the president of the Survivor Advisory Board for Interpersonal Violence and Domestic Violence. Bevan is currently working to improve education in schools about unhealthy signs in relationships, including friendships, as well as mental health services. And I think that's also so important to point out that an abusive relationship is not always a romantic relationship.
Right.
Your kids and even you can be engaged in a relationship that is abusive with someone that is just a friend to you.
Right.
Bevan said Meghan's experiences with abusive relationships began when she was in high school, so it's imperative to teach teenagers and the younger kids what healthy relationships look like. Teaching them how to see red flags and abusive behaviors is super duper important. Bevan has also given several speeches sharing Meghan's story. Her goal is to inspire victims and survivors while keeping them safe. She's currently working on safety planning presentations and teaching those in danger how to safely leave domestic situations. Bevan has also spoken with many politicians to have bills drafted and laws changed to protect victims. She wants everyone to know that Meghan was a survivor. She survived many, many tough things throughout her life, and even though she lost her life to domestic violence, she loved hard, she loved big, and she truly wanted to help people. Bevan wants people to know that there are resources in every state for domestic violence survivors. National organizations such as One Love Foundation, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and the Gabby Petito Foundation are also available. And something that's actually really cool is that Bevan is planning on running in the New York Marathon in a few weeks in order to bring attention to domestic violence and the One Love Foundation. She has a list of 25 victims who have been killed in domestic violence situations written on the t-shirt that she's going to be wearing during that marathon.
That's incredible. It's just one more way to get the word out there that how prevalent this is, that these are real people, and just to keep the focus on education and awareness. If you want to help domestic violence survivors and victims, Bevan says that you can volunteer at local agencies. Simply reach out and ask them how you can be involved. We have that stuff in our show notes. It'll direct you to momsandmysteries.com/DVA, and there's tons of information there. You can also follow Meghan's story on Facebook at Maggie's Voice, as well as on TikTok. There's also a memorial fund established in Meghan's name at ECLI Vibes. Bevan said that she would love for everyone to educate themselves on domestic violence. Breaking the stigma of victim blaming is incredibly important. Bevan said, quote, "Here's the thing. Domestic violence, it doesn't discriminate. It does not care about your race, your financial status, your age, your upbringing, your career choice, your educational level, your friend circle, your religion. All of that is irrelevant. Domestic violence affects so many. Take a look around you. If it's not you, then it is most definitely someone you know."
That is just such a chilling, just realization to have.
Exactly. I mean, statistically, that's exactly what it is. But but it's hidden and
Yes.
people don't feel comfortable in sharing, or if you don't know the signs,
Right.
you don't see it, so you don't know how you can help. So yeah, that's very powerful as well. Bevan also said that victims of domestic violence often have the feeling of shame. She said, quote, "They should not. To be able to leave an abusive relationship is not always easy. As a matter of fact, it is so much harder than people realize. There are so many moving components, and there's a chance of more physical harm to come. It is the harsh reality of being in an abusive relationship. If you are a victim, please know you are not alone. There's support for you and many of us. We are survivors ourselves. We do understand and we do care. So what I ask all of you is to please always remember your worth, your importance. And if someone tries to take that away from you, even if it's just a friend, please pay attention to that warning sign, because people who love you will not try to make you feel less valuable. And if you're in a situation like that now, please know that you are not alone. There are so many people available to help. You matter, you are worthy, you are important. Together we can all make a change and work to stop domestic violence," end quote. I really love that line, because people who love you will not try to make you feel less valuable.
Yes.
That's so important, I think.
That's the big takeaway. Yes, is that if people in your life are not making you feel valuable and important and like somebody that they genuinely want to have around, that's not okay. That is a red flag that you should be looking out for.
Absolutely. Bevan wants Meghan's story to help remind those in similar situations to remember their worth, that none of this is their fault and they do not deserve to be abused. It's imperative to make a safety plan for leaving, and there are places and people that can help you get out, survive, recover, and thrive. Bevan also said, quote, "I would want people who are in it to remember that you can get out with proper safety planning, because your safety is the utmost importance. You can grow and you can survive and you can thrive. In that chapter of your life, it's just the chapter in your life. It doesn't define who you are. It's a chapter, and every day that you wake up, it's a new blank page. So just remember that is not your life. It's just a chapter in your life." Man, this story is so upsetting, of course, in so many ways, but knowing that Meghan had broken up with him and had separated herself, had left things to be able to separate herself, and he still came to find her, came to manipulate her with the dog, and was still able to do this. Like, it just goes without saying, like, how people like this don't change, that
and how far they're willing to go to keep their victim trapped under their thumb. It honestly is so horrifying, like you said, to think that even when a person is doing everything that they can, they're doing the right things, they're separating themselves from this person, they're trying to create distance and space. It is so hard. It is not just a matter of, why don't they just leave this person, or why don't you just break up with them? It's not, if it were that easy, sure, we would all love for it to be that easy, but these people are these abusers. They're manipulators. They know the right things to say. They know the right things to do. And it's never the victim's fault that they struggle to get out from these situations. Yeah. As always, Haley worked very hard on this episode to help put this one together with us. And I believe that this is the first time Meghan's story is being shared on a podcast. So we are, of course, very honored to be able to share the story, and with the help of Meghan's mom. We always just are so appreciative and so grateful for families who trust us with their loved one's story, and especially who want to work directly with us to make sure that we get their loved one's story right. That's also very important to us. So just once again, thank you so much to Bevan and to Haley and to Sheryl and Whitney. There were so many people who had a hand in this episode to kind of bring everything together.
Absolutely. And again, we will have information in our show notes. If none of this applies to you, if you're not in an abusive relationship, still make yourself aware of these signs, because you just never know. You really don't ever know. And where something might seem like a little off, if you look and see the cycle and see, like, actually, this is a pattern. This is what this is. Knowledge is power. I feel like that was like the big thing in the 80s. Knowledge is power. And yeah, it's so important with this. So we'll have all that information in there. We'll have our momsandmysteries.com/DVA, which will have a lot of this information. And also, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mandy and I are working on putting some survivor bags together for a local domestic violence shelter in our area, and we implore you to do the same. We have the information. It will be in our show notes as well. Of course, Haley put together this extensive list, like literally, like if you're looking for, I want to help, but I don't know how to, there is the list to find your area, right? And then there's also a phone script. So if you call and say, I want to help, I don't know how, she's literally written a phone script so you know exactly what to ask. It could not be easier to help. So if you're able to, if you feel led to, this would be a great time to do it.
Yes, and a great opportunity.
Yes. And please tag us. If you do it, post it on social media, anything like that, tag us. We would love to see it and we would love to share.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. That was the episode for this week. We will be back next week, same time, same place, new story, still continuing with our series on domestic violence.
Have a great week.
Bye.